Hello, my name is Katrina, and welcome to Anne Stoops Artist Talk at the C2 Center for Craft. The Manitoba Craft Council was founded in 1978 as Manitoba's only not-for-profit arts organization dedicated exclusively to contemporary craft. We are gathered here today in what we now know as Manitoba, the ancestral heritage of the Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, Dene, Inishituak, Denekotoyate, Denesulene, Nehetuak, Inuit peoples, and is the national homeland of the Red River Métis. These lands include territory subject to treaties 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 10. Craft occupies a space that has the hand and the handmade at the center. It rejoices in sharing knowledge and solving problems. It stems from, creates, and nurtures community. It allows us to build bridges through shared action, but also fosters courage, empathy, and connection. We acknowledge the deep harm caused by settlement, and we look forward to using craft in our efforts towards reconciliation and positive change. Anne Stoops is a Welsh-Canadian multidisciplinary artist living in the village of Cumberland on Vancouver Island, BC. She holds an undergraduate degree of visual arts from Emily Carr University of Art and Design and a Master of Fine Art in Studio Practice from the University of Victoria. Her work is influenced by the crafts of her childhood in Wales and the power of textiles to evoke place and relational connection. She has exhibited across Canada and the UK and has developed a site-based practice conducted through a combination of digital outreach and artist residencies. Stoops has participated in the Canadian Craft Biennial Residency, the Mawa Residency, the Kent Harrison Ranger Station Residency, and was an artist in residence for the Grower College and Mission Gallery in Swansea, Wales. Her work has been supported through multiple grants from both BC Arts Council and the Canada Council for the Arts. Join me in welcoming Anne today.
On my page because I'm going to read. Hi everyone, thank you for coming. I decided to write my artist talk tonight in the form of a letter, like the ones that I've written to the birds. And I hope you don't mind if I read it, and then at the end we can have a more casual question and conversation period. Okay. So, is that changed? Yeah. Okay. Dear friends, thank you for being here with me and my birds. We've traveled a long way. I also want to thank the peoples and creatures who have always called this place home that are allowing us to be together here now. I grew up in Wales in a farming village by the ocean and near a small city called Swansea. My earliest memories are of birds nesting in the eaves of our house and flying down to the washing line and then up to the tall trees in which I would sit with my king-sized wicker chair. There I would read books, including those that told the story of who killed Cock Robin. Swansea is a city built from a combative relationship with the ground. Quarries, farms, and mines have dominated the landscape. Coal and copper have made some rich. But even underground, the birds have kept us company. The canary in its cage was taken into the coal mines, and there its breath, or death, warned us if something was about to go horribly wrong. It wasn't surprising to me then, when I began to read the Welsh stories of the Mabinogion. That birds have been our guides all along. In these stories, written in Wales long ago, they have powers of transformation, guide us between the realms, warn us of danger and deaths, and provide wisdom. Their abilities to exist on land, water, and air gives them a perspective we can rarely see. I began looking for ways that birds are portrayed in story, and also read a Sufi text, The Conference of Birds, where each bird is ascribed a character, a vice, a dilemma, and a journey, and found that birds have often been used as our moral compass. When I began this project, I only knew that I wanted to learn to make rugs. I'd been feeling a little flighty, casting around, quite literally, for connections in lots of far-off places. The pandemic had, again, quite literally, grounded me, and I needed a material practice that could explore that. I was able to get a pivot grant from the BC Arts Council to learn a new skill during the pandemic, and found that a local textile studio was still offering one-on-one classes in rug tufting. After a few hours, I was addicted. The tufting gun allowed me to cover large areas of color quickly, while the punch needle gave me control over details. I experimented with different wool types and backing fabrics until I found what I liked, the feel and look of. While working on these small experiments, I searched through old drawings to work from and came across some sketches I'd made here in Winnipeg in 2019, and the project was born. In fall 2019, I arrived in Winnipeg as an artist in residence with Mawa. I was working with fishing lures as a means of connecting with new communities and environments. This included casting sculptures alongside fishermen into the Red River. I was invited to join a life drawing group heading to the University of Manitoba, who were being given access to specimens from the ornithology collection. As a lover of birds, I was excited to go along and to make some drawings and take a ton of photographs. 2 years later, during the pandemic, one of the drawings I had come across in my collection while looking for source material was of a blue jay that I had sat with for an hour in that library at U of M. Beyond the incredible colors, what had struck me about the bird was how incredibly light the skin was. It had reminded me of lifting my Nana's hand as she lay in a hospital bed minutes away from leaving this world. This drawing became my first successful dead bird rug. It's funny how things sometimes come together to make a new project. A drawing session I hadn't planned, a pandemic, a book, or 2 or 3, and then the news that we should take in our bird feeders because of avian flu. It was running rampant across the country and was particularly strong in BC. There was an uptick in the number of photographs of dead birds coming across my social media feeds, and I couldn't tell if that was the algorithm reading my interests, or a genuine increase in bird deaths. I began asking those who had taken the photographs if I could use them for a project and in what conditions they found the birds. A folder of material grew until I couldn't ignore it, and I started making what you see in the gallery now. Early on, I decided to make the birds at a human scale. At first, at a size you could sit or kneel on, and then, by scaling up my frame at a size that I stretched my arms and legs to make them. It could be painful sometimes. I wanted to make these rugs, these lifeless birds, active rather than passive, and to imagine myself in their place by positioning my body on them. I've been interested for some time in how art might exist for a purpose. I think that craft contains the promise of works of art that live with us and make us move differently in the world. Textiles are so incredibly intimate to our daily lives, and the rug has a history of residing with us as a picture, as a wall hanging, and as a warm space beneath our feet. For each rug, I've made a sketch, transferred that sketch to the linen backing with chalk and charcoal, tufted the colors with dense wool roving, glued the backs, and then placed it on the ground or against a wall. I've taken note of what the original finder and photographer has said, and with these words in mind, I've positioned my body in relation to the rug and held a pose until my body has fed a thought or a feeling into my mind. This performance has been recorded and a letter has been written to the bird. All of this has been uploaded to a website that can be accessed via the QR code tags or the gallery screen. I see this process as an act of empathy. Empathy is a term in psychology for being able to place ourselves in a state of understanding for another. The word, however, as I found out in my research, comes from experiments in the early 1900s into our bodily experience when viewing art, architecture, and dance. It was meant to describe the uplifting feeling from a raised arm in a painting, or the weight felt in our bodies when looking at a lintel over a doorway. This connection between art and empathy made me wonder if art objects purposefully made to activate empathy between each other could work, and would it work with other species? In writing, the ecobiography often uses the environment and nature as a site for empathic observations, and so these writings have also been important to my work. And that includes the book Birds Art Life, which is incredible if anyone's looking for a new book. For this show, I was heavily influenced by painting my decisions for the installation. You can see the red little ribbon there that's in the piece against the wall. Despite using the floor, I looked at paintings for their historical use of posed animals and birds in portraits and still lifes as symbolism, so that the work speaks of birds and us. I'm going to share a couple of details of a few of the works here. Obviously, this work deals with our times of environmental trouble. The flamingo was a learning opportunity as I messaged with the photographer, Madi Bakian, who told me about the massive bird die-offs in Iran. 7,000 plus water birds are suspected to have died because of higher salination of the waters that hold the shrimp that they eat. But the notion that what we eat may not always be what we need applies to our own lives too. This project has also been an opportunity for connection, and the Raven has been a mode of dialogue between myself and Thompson, Manitoba artist Teresa Burrows. We've begun a postal and photography collaboration, taking on the characters of Raven and Puffin. As we both are dealing with the realities of our art practices, myself by the ocean and Teresa in the north, and the influence of our environments on our lives and on our acts of making. After all, we may need to speak up for the birds right now, but sometimes they also speak for us too. And I just want to do some thank yous to C2 and the Manitoba Craft Council for having me, obviously, and Katrina for non-stop emails back and forth, to Willow, Rector, for writing, and Tammy for also writing in the catalog that you can see. To Teresa, who will be here on Friday, who's been my collaborator and my soundboard. Barb, for writing, helping me with my writing and for my grants. Andrea, who was the person who taught me how to do rug tufting. My hubby, who gets to put up with me. And to the Arts Councils, the BC Arts Council and the Canada Council for giving me grants that allow me to be in these places. But yeah, I'd love to just answer questions from you, because I know that there's usually a lot of questions about materials and things like that that is hard for me to just write about in an artist talk. So if you have any, then come for it. Don't be scared. Yeah?
I didn't want to pull my phone out and make a note while you were doing your talk, but what was that one book? It was Birds Art Life or something?
Yes.
Is that what the title was?
We'll go back to it.
Okay.
We can look at it. Yeah, here.
Okay,
Birds Art
okay.
Life.
Thank you.
It's kind of clear. It's an eco-biography type of work where she was dealing with grief and change in her life, and so she started taking up birding.
Okay.
And was going out with a gentleman who'd been a birder for a long time, and she writes really poetically about those connections and the things that happen when she's out and how she feels.
Thank you.
How long have you been fascinated by birds? Does it go back to your childhood?
I think it's been on and off. You know, like my dad and mom would always point out like hawks and things on the road when we were doing road trips and things like that. And yeah, I have very early memories of watching birds around, but I haven't been sort of as obsessed until I started making the work as well. And then you start noticing other things, and it's a nice back and forth that happens that like your original interest in the animal becomes the work, and then the work starts influencing your interest. Like, so I've learned a lot along the way. Like each one, obviously with the poetry and the photography that's on the screen there, like each one has ended up with a story, and people have shared things with me about their experience with birds, and yeah, it becomes a really personal connection between people as well as between me and the birds. But, yeah.
I'd love to know more, like you're very like interdisciplinary artist. I would
Yes.
love to know more about sort of like, you get the picture of the bird, you make the like rug, the photographs and the poetry, and what the sort of, like, is it a process that's the same for each one, or do they kind of like talk about it? Might be.
The first few, it took a little bit of practice, I guess, and a little bit of trying things out to see what would happen. The first few, I knew I wanted to write, but I didn't know what I wanted to write. And so coming to letter writing was sort of a revelation a bit. Like I was sort of just writing observations at first and how I was feeling, or I was writing as if I was writing to people. And then slowly I came around to writing a little more to the birds so that it was a bit more of an intimate connection. But each one's been very different. Like some of them, with the writing in particular, some of them have been like news stories and things that have been in the back of my head, and then something that I do with my body ends up making it go off, like a little phrase go off in my head, or reminds me of a photograph that I've seen. The one that's in the front here, the pileated woodpecker, there was something about how I found myself like kneeling down that reminded me of a photograph of a woman who actually, I didn't want to include the image because it's quite graphic, but a woman who died during trying to perform her own cesarean. So it was like, yeah, there's just been a lot of, when you start moving your body differently, like your brain starts working differently. And I'm really interested in how art can do that, how it can have an influence on me as the artist, not just me making something and then sending it out to the world, to you, and seeing what you think, but also that it can change my thinking, and has a purpose, an active purpose in that way.
I've noticed the eyes.
Yes.
The eyes are not the eyes of dead birds.
They're
And I'm
not.
wondering what your decision was around the sparkle difference in material.
So I started off, I thought they were going to be blank, and they were completely, well, they were empty, and I felt like that left you not reflecting in some way. And then I tried to make them realistic, and then it just looked like I had a whole load of birds. So it was a lot of like trial and error. And what I found I liked with the beading is that it's on a grid structure, so it sort of reflects the QR codes and this sort of digital element in some ways, even if it's just a little hint, but it also has this like reflection back at you that you have to like deal with in some way. And then also, like, there's just lots of things been going on in my head around them, but this idea of decoration and birds as decoration is, around craft in particular, that they're quite often used as a decorative motif, but there's usually meaning behind it too. And so just putting something in that sort of grabs your eye and makes you question that a little bit.
But some, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, they're all the same, like
Yeah.
the same beats. So it kind of pulls them together?
Yeah, I guess so.
They're
I think it's a little, like, they're also a little bit, like, it's reflective, but they're impersonal. Like, there's a little bit of a coldness to it, without it being completely blank and cut out. Yeah.
But when I came to see the show a couple weeks ago, the eyes, and I sort of feel like I'm getting choked up, but the eyes sort of made it the most real to me.
Interesting, yeah.
I don't know if it's because they're kind of sunken compared to the rest of the rug, but even though they're, kind of reflective, that was, to me, it really looked like a dead bird's eye. I don't know.
Not that glassy.
Yeah.
That like
It's-
glassy eye.
Yeah.
It is, but it's also constructed, right?
Yeah.
Like, it has this, like, back and forth between, as I said, it took a little bit of experimentation, and it's not something that's necessarily pinned down, but there was something about the way that it could be both, like, that it could sit as not something that was completely empty, but also not something that was completely alive, you know?
I know the birds were important to you, but I wonder, how did you come to the material? Was it something that was immediate or something that you had to find? In other words, you had to experiment and reject certain materials, and this was the material you wanted to work with?
I tried a lot of different wools. Like, I knew I wanted to work with the rug, and I wanted to work with wool rugs because of this like relationship between the wall, the floor, and this sort of object that is both comforting and a little bit disturbing, that it's a dead thing on the floor. But yeah, I used a lot of different wools first. Like, I used acrylic based, I used cotton based, I tried a lot of things on a small scale. And what I liked about the wool that I primarily use is that the roving is very dense, so it doesn't end up looking like, it's more like painting than drawing, is how I found it. Like, whereas when you use an acrylic-based wool, it tends to have a bit of a drawing or design feel to it. These are like the colors are sort of mashed together, and they give you a really dense tactile experience. And then it also allows me, when I want to use an acrylic-based wool when I want to get a different effect. So yeah, it's experimentation.
I'm sorry, is this raw wool?
So this is, yeah, it's wool roving. Yeah, from Briggs and Little. So they do like the cakes of it that are quite big and dense. It also gave me a very select color palette, which I thought pulled everything together, because rather than going all over the place for colors and materials, I can really focus my attention through that select color palette, and when I need to, just buy one or two little pops of other colors.
Nerdy related question. How is acrylic visually different than wool roving? This is just a curious question.
It has, well, it's thinner.
Okay.
So it has a little bit of a sheen. It takes a lot more to pack together. Like, you have to do more threads through the machine to get it to give you that really dense feeling. Otherwise, you sort of see the matrix of the linen more from through it. And because if you have to go over and over that same spot, you quite often break down the linen matrix, because the gun is quite violent. It's an electric gun. It has a needle and a pair of scissors, and it punches through, cuts the wool on the other side, and comes back out. And so every time you do that, you're sort of breaking the matrix down a little bit. And so by using the roving, it's actually hard. It's hard on the gun because it's like super heavy, but it's lighter on me in a lot of ways. Yeah, and the acrylic just you see more lines because you're working closer together, whereas the roving, like, I can work maybe this far apart in lines. The acrylic, you have to get much closer together. So,
and doesn't the roving fluff out?
the roving fluffs out a lot, yeah, so that's why you can really, like, space out your work. It gets a little bit more fiddly when you want multiple color changes really close together. Like, you have to, sometimes I have to, the roving usually comes in about 6 strands together, so sometimes I have to take a couple out in order to get a bit of a thinner line. But even then, like, for detail work, I use the punch needle, like, I do the hand work, so that you can get that detail.
I wanted to comment on the eyes as well earlier. I felt that the grid kind of reminded me of, when you see a dead bird drawn in comics, it's either cross or an X.
Right, yeah.
And then, but with the bead, the reflective beads, it also gave me the idea of, like, the glint that a bird's eye will have, like a crow or something, when you try
something that you want to see,
it's not quality, it's always hard to catch.
Yeah.
Trying to paint it.
Trial and error is a big thing. I mean, with making any work, like, I think that anybody who says that they know exactly how something's going to turn out is maybe telling little porcupines. No matter what material and how long you've been working with it, like, there's always those little things that you just, like, you've never done before, and you have to try things and try things. Yeah, the first few, I tore the eyes out multiple times, just until I found a material that was working for me. It was doing what I wanted.
Do you have,
Do I have what?
A favorite.
A favorite?
Yes, I know you're not supposed to pick one. Do you have one that resonates most with you?
Well, I named the show after the yellow-bellied sapsucker that's over there, because I liked the story around that bird, in that it like pecks at a tree that it likes to take the sap and the insects out, but it will sometimes like it so much that it will kill the tree. And so that's where Do You Whisper Tiny I'm Sorry is from. Like this idea that you can love something so much that you actually break it. So that sort of sentimental part of me loves that one. Visually, I still love the flamingo.
I mean,
but that's a Pane thing. And the pheasant was just like a labor and a love. But there was a lot of work. It's the biggest one. It filled the whole frame that I've got in my house, which is to the ceiling, and it hurt me.
everyone should lay on the pheasant also. For real, it's
Yeah.
great.
So I noticed on this one that it looks like you've almost sculpted the wing, and there isn't as many sculpted in the other birds that I can see. I'm wondering what.
So that's the first one, and it's because it was made into pieces. And the same with the wing on the yellow-bellied sapsucker. Look, I'm just telling all my secrets now.
And the raven has some relief.
Yeah, so it's because I was working on a smaller frame,
Right.
and so then I had to figure out ways to attach. Again, working in persist, and when you're spending weeks and weeks on something, you're not going to throw it out because you didn't like certain things. So yeah, at least the raven was actually one of the last ones, but I didn't like something I had done, so I actually ended up cutting and hacking and sewing it back together. So I sort of ended up going back to that process, and I think that's somewhere that it might continue to go.
I was wondering if sculpted would be part of the future, or
It's because I feel like I've got to a point where I sort of understand my materials and what I'm doing. I really want to see how far I can break them down next. And because I've got probably a dozen pictures of birds that are very far into decomposition. And I didn't know enough about what I was doing with the materials yet to tackle them, so I put them aside. But now I think like I want to see if I can like break down the wool, break down the backing more, but know that I can save it because I've worked a few things out. Like how far I can push that, but yeah. But I think you have to have the full ones to have the broken ones as well. Like that balance has to be there. If you have all these broken ones, then it still looks like you didn't know what you were doing. So yeah, that's the next step.
Decomposition.
Yeah.
Why does decomposition fascinate you, or is it that aesthetics of it?
I think in part it's also the stories that go along with that. Like the people who found the birds that were more decomposed have very visceral reactions as to why they took the photographs. And so I have a lot of really complicated responses from people about that process that I then want to delve into myself as well. And also like then allow other people to think about and delve into like at what point is it like grotesque versus semi-beautiful, which I think the ones in here are, you know? Like where does death tip over into that, and how do we relate to that breakdown? It's a breakdown.
Well, it feels a bit like you're providing like a death ritual for the birds.
yeah.
And kind of wonder, like, you know, if, like, to me that feels like an act of empathy.
Yeah.
Kind of mourning for the natural world that's changing a lot.
It is. I mean, a lot of them were window strikes. A few of them were cars. I said the flamingo was this like mass bird die-off. So there's a variety of reasons. Like some of them people just didn't know, they just came across them in the street. But yeah, there's a lot of ways that we're having that impact on the avian world and on the rest of the world. But I think also like when we look at something like cute and no longer there, like we can have a reaction to that in a much more empathic way than maybe for ourselves or for bigger issues. It's like a little more intimate. And a lot of experiences of these things made me think about other things that are like breaking down or I'm having trouble with. That maybe other people want to have conversations about or to think about in a more intimate setting. It's a little bit melancholy.
I just have a small comment. Something I noticed that I really enjoy is that when you were talking about the birds and we were looking at images of them, the screen is moving a little bit.
Yeah.
So it kind of
It's
felt
breathing.
like breathing.
Yeah.
So there's this feeling of life in this
We have to have a permanently swaying screen now.
Yeah. Artist talks, you have to have a fan behind the screen.
We did talk about puncturing quite a bit when I was talking to Willow for my essay, like about this, obviously with the sapsucker approaching the tree, but also this like the way the gun works and it punctures the thing and how we could like set up, whether I could set up a screen and have like sound pieces or videos and stuff, but that's a whole other arena to delve into. It's always a funny balance between like how much of your process do you show and share, and how much do you want people to just find what they find in things. Like, I find that a difficult balance because I want to talk about everything. Like, I'm quite happy to blabber away about materials.
Speaking of materials, how did you decide what color the backings are? And that's like,
Okay, that's just my fun. I'm not gonna. Yeah, I would go to the store and I was like, maybe pink today, maybe yellow today.
it's like installer advantage, but they're like really bright, really fun colors on the back, and I was just curious.
There is like when I started putting on the wall. So at first I just found whatever I could. But there was something that happened the first time I put them on the wall in a studio space where I had, I think it was a green from behind, and you get this little tiny like glow.
That one has
on the
it.
back of the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I kind of just liked it. Like it's not really there, but it is there. It just, yeah.
Yeah.
Again, that like little hint of life that's not really there. I don't know.
Yeah, a surprising amount of people also, like, because you're allowed to like sit and lay on them, will like look at the back.
Take a look.
You get to look at the back, right? You get to look at the back, and then everyone always goes, ooh, because it's like a fun color. And I was just curious, so thank you for satiating my curiosity.
The linen didn't do it for me. Again, it's experiment, trial and error. Like, it was just like, you could see all the glue.
Well, now I gotta ask.
Yeah.
What are you using for the backing?
It's a felt, but it's a felt made out of made out of recycled bottles.
Oh.
So yeah, it's commonly available at
So you're not
fabric
using
stores.
tension or something?
Yeah, so I just I use a very heavy carpet glue to glue all of the wool into place, and then that also gets used to put the felt on. It's a very, very messy process. My front hall is.
So you're using two backings actually?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
You're using like a rug hooking backing, like a hessian or.
Yeah.
And then felt.
And then felt. Yeah, it's a lot. The whole the ending process is almost as much work as making the things. Like they're big, and I live in a little trailer, and so they come off the frame, which is bigger than me. And then I have to find somewhere, in the summer it's been my deck, to lie them out on, to get, it's a super thick sticky glue that gets on my feet, and then I traipse it through the house, and then I have to scrub the floor. And luckily it is sort of water soluble, so you can get it off the floor.
So if it's water soluble, technically you could eventually take them apart.
I could, yeah, with a lot of work, but yeah. Yeah, it's there are non-water soluble ones, but I needed something I could actually clean up if I needed to, and if I make errors to work with. And at first, I also wanted them to be able to biodegrade, which is why I first started using the linen on the back, but it just wasn't going to be hefty enough for what I needed.
It's not strong enough.
Yeah, and they're also super heavy. So the felt actually got heavier, the bigger the pieces. I had to use a thicker felt because they just couldn't hold up the weight of the wool. Like, it would just fall apart, basically, like the linen just couldn't hold it up.
Interesting in a way.
Yeah, and that's the next step, right? The
That's
falling
the
apart part.
The decomposing.
Yeah, it's like how far can I make this drip down, like tear apart? But yeah.
I'm also curious about why, or like, people are allowed to sit and lay down on them and touch them, which isn't like the norm in art. And I'm curious about that decision. It's been a very exciting one for visitors, but I'm just
I
curious.
wanted people to be able to have the same experience that I had, like if they want to. Most people don't want to be that performative, but I'm giving you examples. So if you want to, you can get really into the movements and have your own experience in that way. But also, I just think that if I'm working with something that is essentially has been a domestic product in our lives for years, then why wouldn't you use it? If they can hold up to it, why wouldn't I give people the opportunity?
This one is interesting because of the fold.
Yeah.
When Shauna and I came to see your show, Shauna was really trying hard to straighten it out.
I like to bug people.
She's like, she's not the only one.
Is that a little bit of humor, or is that intent? Like, what was the...
When I sat on it, I was completely folding myself.
Okay.
And so I sort of wanted to throw that hint into the carpets. And I also realized that they were all flat. Like these ones sort of go up the wall, but I like hadn't given that like material dimension to any of the others. So I thought I'd, just throw a little curveball in there.
Mm-hmm.
That's entertaining though. The idea of people wanting to like flatten birds is yeah.
It is, I think it's like the audience to our craftspeople, and they're like, oh no, it's like someone rumpled it. Like, let me fix it. And then they're like, it happens like a couple times a week, and it's very funny.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love the not knowing too. Like that's part of the great thing of working with things that people can interact with is you don't know. Like you don't know what people are going to get out of it. I've had a few little comments that have come across like my social media where people have reached out, but like other than that, I'm like relying on just people enjoying it or crying or getting something.
There's been a lot of like peaceful laying, I would say,
Which
would
is
be what I would
fascinating,
describe.
yeah. That people want to lie peacefully with birds that are not alive is interesting. Like the pheasant as well, like it reminds. So my husband does fly tying, and he's always got pheasant capes around because they use all different feathers for fly tying. And so I was making this giant version of something that sits around our house for his craft. So out of wool.
What's fly tying?
Oh, for fishing?
Okay.
Yeah, making like tiny, tiny little flies to cast in the water. Yeah, I did a project before where I was trying to make human-sized ones, and then like casting them into different environments. So I had this little sort of obsession with trying to find ways to connect with people using crafted objects of different types in weird ways where I photograph myself. I get to play games. People look at you funny. It started with a little ball of string. We did a residency on the Rideau Canal, so we could only take limited materials, and it was a whole group of people canoeing from Kingston to Ottawa. And so you had limited materials, but you were all artists and writers and trying to figure out ways to interact with what we were doing. And so I took a ball of string with a pencil attached and a piece of elastic, and I was casting it into the river at different spots into the canal to see what the line would do and creating line drawings. And then I realized that I was doing it at the same time as fishermen or like dog walkers throwing sticks into the things. So I sort of became interested in those little moments that maybe don't get documented, but someone gets to look at you and like think about what they're doing in a different way.
Well, and if there's no more questions, thank you so much, Anne. That was like fantastic.